You all to our second virtual tasting benefiting Vintage Hollywood and Go campaign. Before I get started and introduce our exciting two winemakers today, I just would like Kristen to say just a couple words about Go campaign. I know most of you are familiar, but never hurts to hear about what they're doing and how they're helping the community.
Thank you, Allison. Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen from Go campaign. First of all, thank you all for being here. It's so nice to see you all here on this Saturday. So Go campaign, the Go stands for Giving Opportunity to Children, and we aim to improve the lives of vulnerable children throughout the world. One opportunity with local heroes to deliver local solutions, one child at a time. And so the funds from today's event will actually be going towards the COVID-19 efforts that we've been focusing on. We've already granted more than $175,000 in the past few months, and we will continue to grant money for that and also to racial inequalities throughout Southern California. So thank you so much for taking part in this and helping us to achieve our mission, and we hope you enjoy yourselves. Take it away, Allison.
Thanks, Kristen. So both William from Two Shepherds and Scott from Native Flora would have been new participants in Vintage Hollywood. And I know you guys have all supported our events for many years and have not probably met these two guys. And what's really special for me to introduce them is these are two very small producers who are very passionate about what they do, but you're not going to find them in the mainstream in a lot of retail stores or restaurants, maybe a few handpicked ones that they've done. But what's really unique about these two guys is that they are two people who march to the beat of their own drum. And I'm not sure how much you follow in the wine press or what you are looking for when you're buying wine, but there are a lot of trendy terms out there. There's, natural wine, there's raw wine, there's organic wine, biodynamic, sustainable, there's clean wine. There was a huge thing this week with Cameron Diaz coming out with her new wine that's called Clean. And creating a few sort of responses by people in the industry, because these are a lot of misnomers and terms that people jump on to kind of grab your attention, the consumer. And so I'm hoping that when you listen to these two guys speak and what they're doing in their vineyards and what their focus is on making wine, you'll understand that the real key is to get to know the winemakers and understand what their philosophies are and not jump on the marketing hoopla of terms. So with that, I want to introduce to you William Allen from Two Shepherds, who's based in Sonoma. I've known William for a number of years now, and if you've ever been to the Garage East Festival or Raw Wine, you might have tasted his wine at those events. But William does not ascribe to the natural wine movement or the organic wine movement. He's a minimal interventionist, and he'll get to tell you all about that in what he's doing. But William is a tech guy turned wine blogger turned winemaker. So he was, what did you say, a shepherd of the palate, and now a shepherd of the grape. Yeah. And so I'm
the shepherd of shepherds.
I'm excited to hear kind of his story and what he's doing, and he will take us on a little tour of his property outside where you get to meet some of his animals he'll tell you about. And on the other side, we have Scott Flora of Native Flora, and he's up in the Dundee Hills in Willamette Valley, Oregon. And Scott, I wrote an article about Scott earlier this year. We met about a year or so ago when I was visiting in the area, and I called him the contrarian of wine. In fairness, you're looking at two contrarians of wine. And they really make decisions based on what's right for them. If you tell Scott you cannot do it, Scott will do it. And so he will tell you a little bit about what that entails. So a lot of the rules we learn about wine, he has debunked. So I have spoken enough. Scott will also give you a view of his vineyard because he lives on his property as well. And so with that, William, if you would like to welcome everyone and tell us about Two Shepherds.
Sure. This is still a pretty small passion project, though we've grown quite a bit, and actually we've doubled in size in 2 years, but that still means we're 3,000 cases. I started it completely by myself in 2010 with 1 barrel each of 7 varieties, all of which I had never made before. Just kind of jumped in. Originally as a focus as a Rhone producer, I bought this rundown, dilapidated farm in 2010 and planted first Grenache Noir and then Grenache Gris. Make about 15 different wines a year, which is a little silly, but that's what you're. I have many nicknames. One of them is the insane master of small lots. The other is that I'm unfine and unfiltered like my wines. Probably two of my industry adjectives. We've always been about native yeast, and actually because it wasn't a big discipline, it wasn't a big hardcore dogma. The first facility I made wine at didn't allow a yeast to be inoculated, so I had kind of was curious anyway, and it just kind of stayed from there. We have become, for better or worse, a quasi part of the natural wine movement, only frankly because we're more inspired by the movement and the initiative and kind of three core principles of organic farming. So no synthetics in the vineyard, no additions to the wine other than a small amount of sulfur, which I've always been very passionate about. And then the usual big, stupid bullshit debating point is how much sulfur, which I refuse to dogmatically be told how I sulfur my wine. So if I get a request to an invitation and they tell me the limit is X, I tell them, bye-bye, have fun, not coming. But that's it. And we used to say we make clean natural wines. Thanks to Cameron Diaz, I can't use that phrase anymore because wine writer ripped her a new orifice this week for all of that. But we've always been, the thing about natural wine that's always drove me crazy, the term besides the ambiguity, is that it can be used as an excuse for what I call dirty, flawed wines. We do not release wines that smell like nail polish and Band-Aid and things like that. So we're committed to that. Happens to us. If you make wine in our style, it will happen. We typically throw those away. Not fun to do, but after 15 years and mostly direct to consumer, if we will not release a wine that we will not happily chug ourselves. And so that's kind of the core principle.
And William, just on that note, because I know that we'll get into this more, but can you just briefly touch upon what you mean by sulfur? I know that a lot of people don't understand that it's natural in wine and it's a benefit to preserving wine, but is there anything you can elaborate on?
No, it's just that, I mean, I think today most wineries don't overuse sulfur, but I mean, it has occurred during the fermentation process. It has been traced back to the time of the Romans and ceramic urns. A little bit of sulfur helps keep a wine stable and travel better. Some of our wines we age, we're still pouring a 13 red and a 14 white at the tasting room. So that helps for the first couple of years in that aging process. But it's primarily, and a few times I've done a zero wine. It was great for 6 months, and then we start to get bottle variation. And I think consumers, and if no sulfur is your philosophy too, by the way, that's fine. Just don't tell me what my philosophy is supposed to be. I mean, it's a big world. I don't drink over-oaked, overripe Napa Cab, but if that's what you want to drink, that's also your right and philosophy. Just don't tell me that that's what I have to do. So I firmly believe in, with the vineyards I have and the varieties I've made, you know, I can go over to a barrel of Grenache Blanc, stand 5 feet away, pull the bung, and I can tell you there's zero free sulfur protecting that wine. So I mean, it's just something that it's innate. So we use as little as we humanly have to, and enough to keep a wine fresh and bright and stable. That's all the conversation we need to have on sulfur, please.
So, I won't go down the technical aspect.
Before we jump into where you are, because I know you'll take us on a little tour with that, Scott, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about Native Flora and how you got started?
So I got started in an old Italian family in California, just south of Napa over the Northeast Bay. Started drinking wine when I was about 6. Started collecting wine when I was 18, and this is like, you know, well over 4 decades ago. And I've just been an avid consumer of wine for years and years and years, and collector of wine. I worked all over the world for 20 years. We moved from Hong Kong to Oregon out of choice in terms of where do you want to live, where do you want to raise your kids, where do you want to exit the corporate world. And upon arriving here, snuck out into the Willamette Valley, had not paid close attention to Oregon's wine development, and ran into Patty Green and some people like that who were just getting started. And their wines were, in my estimation, were on par with the number of the Burgundies that were in my cellar, but they were different. They were every bit as good. And so I kind of got the bug here, and I've got this valley sitting in my backyard. And so I started doing what I always did, homework. And we set up a very contrarian, in terms of conventional thinking, winery. On the whole list of Allison's wines that she was talking about,
Hold on one second, Scott. I don't mean to interrupt, but you're not visual right now because I think you're talking to your phone.
Let me try this.
There we
Does
go.
that bring me back?
No.
No.
I can see him.
Who can see me?
Yeah.
Who can't see
If
me?
you go in gallery view, you can see Scott, but not in speaker view.
Oh,
So,
got it. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
that is difficult for imaging, but it will go.
so do I need to change something on my end that will make people function better that way, or am I okay?
You're
ahead.
good. Keep going.
All right.
Story.
I will just drop my voice an octave and we can go to the voice of God. No, and it was just a matter of, we had this opportunity that kind of presented itself, and I'll show you a little bit of the vineyard and all the things that we do wrong. I was started to say that on Allison's lists of adjectives describing wine, the one that she was missing, in my opinion, is good wine. And that's what we produce. So I don't go organic or biodynamic or natural or any label other than I want to make good wine. I will not ban all synthetics because I keep sheep in my vineyard that do all of our mowing, which means copper sulfate's off the table for me from a herbicide standpoint, or not herbicide, but a fungicide standpoint. And it forces me to do things periodically other than sulfur, but I'm okay with that because once you understand half-lives on some of these things, it's the good way to go. So I would describe myself as a pragmatic farmer. There are, as I explained to Allison earlier, I said, any of my children can walk out into the vineyard, pull grapes off the vine when they're ripe and eat them, and I never have a concern in the world because of how we farm and how we manage things here.
That's great. So, William, I don't know if you maybe want to tell us how you ended up in Sonoma and maybe share with us where you're living and who your roommates are, aside from your lovely wife.
The farm. Yeah, so I'm in the Russian River Valley of Sonoma. So came out of tech, still actually have a day job on the side to manage the investment and the growth, both in land and the winery. Since I didn't inherit the classic $10 million you need, I've had to keep a job to do that alone. So we fell in love with the Russian River Valley years ago. Just ended up moving here, buying a farm, starting the winery. My girlfriend and partner, Karen, who works for a very large winery in consumer research, came on board as a partner in 2015. We took a film studio, which to our conversation earlier, we don't quite know what they used to film there, in a warehouse, and turned that into a winery. So clearly some industries are not doing as well as others over the changes, but loved the, and started right away. So we don't grow all of our own grapes. We also don't buy grapes. We lease vineyards. So it's a little bit of a difference typically. So down the street from us is the only planting of Trousseau Gris in California. We lease about 20% of that. And that's kind of the more common way that we do things. And I'd like to say, even if we had $1 billion, I have access to the oldest Sanso vineyard in the world, 2 hours away in Lodi. We have access to one of the only plantings of Pickpool in California, a couple hours away. So I clock about 3,000 miles during harvest, being in all these places and checking them out. And if we're not growing them ourselves, we have pretty stringent contracts. Our growers tend to be small. We're symbiotic relationships. We tend to be really good friends. They do projects for us. We invest in them as we can. And so it's a very, I wish I could farm all these vineyards or buy all these lands, but I can't. But we're dedicated to some of these really amazing sites. And if it's rare and unique and the only one there is, that's kind of right up our alley. So, and satisfies my right brain of, I've been making 15 lots when I was half the size. I would probably make 3 times as many of that if I had enough hours in a day, just because I wish I had 5 more lifetimes to be a winemaker, but I don't. It's a late start to the game.
Can you take us out and show us where you are?
Yeah, real quick. I'll just pop into the vineyard real quick, and then we'll go over and see the love of our lives, which is all of our animals that we have, our children.
So as William steps outside, which should just be a moment, let's see if he picks up. Otherwise, I'll let.
I can just steal his time.
All right.
Oh, there we go.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
We're mobile. So this is our original Grenache vineyard. It's 8 years old, so it's still quite a baby. We planted it. This section is in 4 foot by 3 foot rows, and then our Grenache Gris block, which is on the other side, is in 3 foot by 3 foot rows. There are no tractors here. There's no machinery. There's William and the weed whacker. So we hand farm, hand maintain, pretty much do everything ourselves. Given it's only about an acre, 1,500 vines, we're able to do that pretty well. So quite a cool climate to grow Grenache in. We struggle to ripen it some years. This part of the Russian River Valley is actually the cool part that actually gets a lot of fog. Certainly not like Willamette Valley, but for the Russian River Sonoma, quite cool. All right, I'll try and not make you dizzy as we go through the animals. Quick. So pretty much everything on this place we've had to rebuild over 10 years. If we haven't, it was fallen down and dilapidated. And we'll just quick. This is the Grenache Gris vineyard, which is only 2 years old. So we're not getting any fruit from this for probably another couple of years at a minimum. So one of the only plantings of Grenache Gris in the Russian River Valley and California on a 3x3 basis. So lots of no weeds. That's not from herbicide. That's from William and the. All right, now to the babies. Come on, Luna. Can you guys see okay?
Yes.
So
Yep.
This is Luna. She's a Sicilian miniature donkey. She was born the week before the shelter in place started. We didn't even know her mother was pregnant, so Karen came out to feed her one morning and found Luna halfway out. That's Mama Sophia. And over there is Dolce, the original Sicilian miniature donkey here. So hey dude, put that thing back in. Okay, never mind.
Oh dear.
So they don't go in the vineyard this time of year because they will strip all the leaves. They're not as well trained as other vineyard animals. But in the winter, it's the only fertilization we get. We don't till the soil. We don't fertilize or amend, other than them running around chomping through. And then these are our 2 goats. Chicken, get out of the way. Go. This is Chubby and Chew. They also help in the winter. In the summer, they will make a beeline as fast as they humanly can when they're being milked to eat the vineyard, so they're not allowed in the vineyard this time of year either. Hey, girl. All the animals have their own label in our wines. So instead of the boring 2 sheep logo that we use, the goats are on our Pinot Meunier. Luna's on her brand new sparkling can wine. The donkeys are on the Pinot Gris that we're going to have. The dogs are on a blend. And the chickens don't get a wine. That's it. All right, I'm gonna go back to the house and let Scott take over.
Thank you. Well, Scott, if you would tell us about
I
where
already-
you are in the Dundee Hills and show us a little bit.
Well, let me see if I can get video on for you. Can you see outside now?
Yes.
All right. So as I move out of the building, I have to switch over to remote because we're on top of a mountain by ourselves. But if I lift you up a little bit, you can kind of see that we span a pretty good area. We've got about 35 acres total, about 17 planned. We are at the top. That is literally the top of the mountain right behind us that we're on. And this is the wrong of the hill. I'm going to walk back through the house and I'll show you the south or the north side. And almost all of our vineyards are actually north slope vineyards, which when we planted, everyone thought we were completely insane because you can't get grapes right unless you have heat, which is a fallacy. You can get grapes right if you have sun, because carbohydrate production in grapes is a function of photosynthesis, which is driven by light. And when you're at the latitude that we live at, just north of the 45th parallel, you get quite a bit facing
Scott.
north. And so, have I cut out on you?
Yeah, just for a second, but you're back.
As I move around, it's going to be tough with this location that we're at. But this is here. I'll give you guys kind of a slow panorama, and hopefully the wind isn't too loud for you. But we do get a steady breeze up here all summer long. That's the Coast Range of Oregon, about 60 miles away. That is across the valley, the traditional side of what you would normally see. That's where Adelsheim is. That's where Lakini's at. Everybody in the wine world in Oregon lives over on that side of the valley. And then Mount Hood is tucked in behind the trees over there. We actually have some extremely steep slopes. That's about a 30% grade facing slope that we farm. That one of the wines you just received called the Heretic comes from.
Oh, wait, we're having a little
Unlike William.
There we go.
Yeah, no, sorry. It's, again, when I literally the nearest tower to us that can support this call is across the valley there. It sits up behind Shea Vineyard and Pennerash's place. So it's about 4 miles away, and that's what I have to.
Oh. Did we lose him? Okay. He will be back. I'm sorry about that. This is what happens when you're in a remote, isolated area. As soon as he comes, I'll let him continue on. But William, I don't know
We do
if...
have Anna.
Oh, there he is. Never mind.
Am I back?
You're
Yes,
back.
it's like a disappearing act. I'm going to switch back over to the computer screen too.
There we go. So if you want to leave your phone on, we can see you while you're talking.
No, I'll leave the computer on and keep talking to you.
Okay.
Or you want the double view? Is that the deal? You want the profile at the same time?
That way we can see you when we do speaker view.
Oh,
That's correct.
I got you. So let me try.
Sorry. One little technical glitch. No, can't hear. Go back to what you were doing, Scott. It was fine. Oh, there.
Are you there or not?
There we go.
You can hear me?
Yes.
And I can do double views. So if I'm staying like this, then it's moving with me if you're in speaker view?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So go back to moderating. We'll keep talking.
So I was gonna say, you've seen now these two really unique places. Scott focuses more on Pinot Noirs and William on Rhone varieties. And just to clarify, Rhone varieties, we're talking about Mourvèdre, Cinsault, Grenache, Picpoul, some grapes you might not know. There are a lot of different grapes grown in the Rhone Valley. So maybe, William, you could talk about these grapes. You talked about how you source from other vineyards and what you're looking for, but can you talk a little bit more about the diversity of grapes you're working with?
Sure. I mean, we work with, I try not to count because it scares me, probably 10 different varieties, some of which we make 3 different ways, but Carignan, Cinsault, we have worked with Mourvèdre. We currently don't have a source that we like, so we just have skipped it for a couple of years. Which is preferable to making a compromise. Picpoul, which we're in love with, Vermentino, Grenache Blanc. We used to make Marsanne, Roussanne, and Viognier. I've discarded those in lieu of some other more interesting things. And then we also now do Pinot Gris, Trousseau Gris, Skin Contact, and Pinot Meunier.
Cool. Well, I know everyone here has the Two Shepherds wines, and if you're thirsty and want to get started, maybe you could take us through the first wine style.
So the first is Vermentino, which comes from an area I didn't even know grew grapes until about 4 years ago. That's kind of an up and coming area in California. Part of our quest for organic vineyards leads us more and more out of Napa and Sonoma, where they're not very committed to organic farming or biodynamic or many things. And frankly, also our price point on our wines is designed to be very reasonable. I like to say we make wine for the people. My accountant thinks I'm an idiot. But so you also can get, the growers in other more remote areas are willing to plant different varieties. I've got this grower actually looking at Tourette Noir for me, which is an obscure Rhone variety, and some other things. And so Steve Mathiasen, who's kind of a legendary viticulturalist and also winemaker in Sonoma, started this project and then pulled me in, and we were delighted to get actually 4 different varieties for it. I have never worked with Vermentino until about 3 years ago. I think we were probably most well known for Grenache Blanc, is the white Rhone that put us on the map. And I've completely fallen in love with it. It's defied everything I thought I could make of a great wine, given the climate is much hotter than we would have liked, although the diurnal shift is pretty big. But this place sees 110 degrees for weeks in the summer, dropping down to the 60s at night, but still really hot, which originally was something I was very unsure of. So we only made 50 cases. Our first vintage, we now make about 250 cases. But I love this because I'm able to pick it at quite low bricks for acidity, which is first and foremost the hallmark. We love as a byproduct when wines can be low in alcohol. We're not fixated on that as a number, but if I can drink 2 bottles instead of 1, bully for me. So we're able to pick this quite early and get this 11% alcohol, which is peachy, but more importantly, we get texture and brightness in a young wine. By comparison, our Grenache Blanc just released is 2016. It takes 3 years in the bottle before it delivers what I want. So it's great for cash flow, great for consumer immediate satisfaction. It's just fun and fresh to drink. We do it half in stainless steel for the freshness, which I used to be very against, and I've kind of changed my tune on that. I can be contrarian of myself even, and half neutral barrel, so which were for our style wines. We think neutral barrel is an important part of what we do, kind of light or delicate. We don't think, unlike Pinot Noir and Syrah in some cases, I don't find that new oak would add anything to any of our wines. And we save a lot of money, so it works out well.
And when you say the neutral oak, while it's not imparting oak characteristics like newer oak would do, the neutral oak adds to the texture, the mouthfeel that you get. That's what it's kind of imparting in the wine.
And the concentration. So barrels have an oxygen transfer rate. We call it the angel share. It's why we have to top them. So stainless steel barrels are great because they go in the barrel and that's you're done with them. You have to every 2 to 4 weeks top a barrel because through evaporation, so the wine is concentrating and picking up a little more complexity. And so with this wine, it's kind of like peanut butter and chocolate. Half stainless steel gives us, that inner substance keeps and preserves aromatics and freshness. The neutral barrel adds a little bit of complexity and richness and texture.
Thank you.
So it's become one of my favorites. I would say it's still a bit of a hand sell. There's only 110 acres of Vermentino in California. We would like to call it Roll, which is what they call it in southern France, and we are kind of Francophile purists. The TTB will not, our government will not pass a label. They don't think Roll exists, even though that's what it's called in southern France. So my FU to the government is to put AKA Roll on the front label.
So I know, Scott, you have 3 Pinots, so we'll probably do the Williams other wines, but since we lost you for a second, I don't know if you'd like to jump in and talk to us a little bit about what you have planted, because while everyone probably thinks of Willamette Valley as Pinot Noir land, you're doing a few other things.
We are. We actually have, I'll talk about grapes in general. Is the audio coming through like this, or do you want me to switch back over?
It's a little echoey.
All right, let me try something else.
Now you're muted.
Let's try this.
There we go.
Okay, we'll go that way. No, what I started to say is that the site in itself up here is largely dedicated to Pinot Noir. We actually have 9 different clones of Pinot that we grow. And the vineyard is incredibly complex. We have 7 different soil types, a 400-foot elevation change. We have every aspect known to mankind. And so we get this huge diversity of Pinot that we grow. But we also have a grape called Pinot Gouge, which I doubt Williams even heard of yet. It comes from 1936. There was a Pinot Noir vine over in Nuit Saint-Georges at Henri Gouge's vineyard that mutated from black to white. It was a spontaneous mutation. He propagated it. So there's now 12 acres of it in the world. 2 of them live here. And it's this fabulous white. It was fun listening to you about how you talk about combining stainless and you're also combining or also using neutral wood on things. I'm still getting an echo. Are you guys?
Nope.
Nope, it's
Okay,
all
good. I'll live with it then. That's fine. So we've got the Pinot Gouge. We have a ton of Pinot Blanc planted. I am an ABC shop, which is rare for up here. It's anything but Chardonnay. Everybody else in the valley is on this huge Chardonnay revival at Kick. Not one of our favorites. I've got some Chenin coming this year. So we'll be putting Chenin in the ground up here. It'll be the first planting in the Dundee Hills of it. And I've been growing a little bit of Malbec and a little bit of Syrah up here in defiance of all convention, and have figured out how to get the Malbec ripe. And so we're actually going to be putting another acre of that in the ground this year too. So we're a little bit across the board too. William, I love the fact that you make 3,000 cases and do 15 wines, because I make about 2,000 cases and do 10. So thank you for being just as stupid.
I'm curious, very quickly, Scott, you were saying that you have the, wait, what? No, I'll have to come back to it with the wines. I'll come back to it. I think I was jumping over. But before we move into tasting Pinot, William, do you want to kind of go through that Ramato, the Pinot Gris, and
Sure.
explain what that is? And then we'll come back to Pinot.
Yeah, so obviously you can see this is not your classic Pinot Gris or Grigio that people think of as a white wine. We have a lot of fun educating consumers on this, because most people will literally defy me that Pinot Gris is not a white grape, which is kind of funny because it's inherent in the name. Gris is French for gray, but it is not it is most commonly used, pressed immediately off the skins to do a white wine, or sometimes a brief skin contact for a rosé. But it is a gray skin variety, and actually the darker. So we work with Trousseau Gris, Pinot Gris, Grenache Gris. I'm a huge fan of gray skin varieties. The more I've traveled rural France, the more I believe Rhone varieties tend to probably propagate all three. I've seen Carignan Gris, Picpoul Gris out in parts of the Languedoc. Human beings don't propagate them, just like they don't propagate the, I forgot what that was called, Scott, the Pinot
Gouge.
Yes, I love that name. And what's really great about gray skin varieties, having worked with three and skin contact them all, is that the skin contact really imparts a really fun freshness and flavor and texture, depending on the style you choose to do. So this today is popularly called, going back to trends, an orange wine. Not a term we typically use. It is orange in color. It is 5 days on the skins, which most purists of orange wines and master somms would say, you know, that's not orange wine. Orange wine is 7 years on the skins and an urn and blah, 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 which would say bite my ass. We've been accused of being trendy and chasing orange wines, to which I say I've been making orange wines back since 2011, which was the first year we were told it was the wettest, rainiest winter in Sonoma in decades. And they were told, don't make skin contact wine. So I, of course, that vintage made a skin contact wine as my first. And I've been on an exploration for years. We do 3 different skin contact programs.
Sorry, we'll get it.
Okay, it's all right. Our goal in skin contact wines, I'm not a fan. My palate is very, I think I joke that I kind of regress or maybe progress more like a millennial every year. More and more our portfolio shifts to fun, fresh, vibrant, drinkable. My girlfriend hates the term porch poundable, but those are the wines that we like to consume the most, not that we don't drink a wide variety. And the Pinot Gris, to accomplish that, we only do 5 days on the skins. I've made it for 10 and 15. And then we also destem it. So if you leave it on the skins for longer, the color doesn't change, right? Generally, when you're making wine, most of the color is extracted, depending on what you're doing in the variety, you know, in the first 5-10 days. But the flavor changes dramatically. As I always tell people about orange wines, Canadian wines, or red wines in general, people have teased us that our red wines look like rosé because they're light in color. And what do we do to stop the color? I'm like, what does color taste like to you? Can you taste color? No, you can't taste color. Color is a byproduct. What you taste is what the skins impart, right? And all wines, with the exception of Aglianico and probably something else Scott can name, that I can't, have clear juice. So I always think of rosé as the anti-orange wine. Rosé is made from red grapes with a few hours of skin contact. So if you've had a wonderful rosé of Pinot Noir and tasted it side by side to the Pinot Noir was made as a red wine, they taste nothing alike. And that's the same thing in the skin contact category. So, and so this one is just, it was one of our, I call it our holy trinity of our 3 new wines. that we started back in 2017 as 50 case science projects that are now our 3 largest productions, the Vermentino, the Pinot Gris, and the Carbonic Carignan, that really kind of represent, you know, reasonable priced, approachable, affordable, don't have to be a master somm, just fun to drink. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish in this. It does also have our donkeys. So there's a dual donkey logo on the front, and probably kind of hard to see, although you guys have the bottles, so I don't know why I'm showing you. and the donkeys on the back. And it's become our most popular wine, literally. For a guy who's supposed to be a Rome producer, we bottled 375 cases in February, and we're just about sold out, which just kind of blew me away.
And what's really fun, I think, about a wine like this, whether you call it an orange wine or not, and it doesn't have all the negative connotations of orange wine, is that it's refreshing and it's crisp and it's bright, but it has that structure that will fit with food. I mean, it pairs with food. It's not it's got texture, and that's what we want when we're pairing with food. So I think that's really fun. It's a great wine for the summer. It's a great wine for year round, but it's a great wine for the summer. So.
Yeah, it's got the kind of a savory quality. We do a more traditional orange wine where we do white Rhones on the skins for 10, 15 days. And those tend to, you know, whereas I could drink this as a cocktail wine if I wanted, the more classic orange wines that we make really kind of beg for food. And I think that's as you get into more serious, structured, complex wines, which we make a few of those, you know, they're great on their own, but man, pair them with the right food pairing and it just kind of sings.
Yeah. So let me ask you, would you want to do the Mourvèdre before Pinot or after Pinot?
No, I haven't tried that. Why don't we give Scott a chance to talk, and then we can come back to the Mourvèdre.
Okay, so we're going to move over. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to go into chat. I will integrate those questions in. But Scott, if you want to kind of talk about your Pinots and start us through a little tasting and where to go.
Before we do that, I'm going to help William out a little bit here.
Okay.
So William, the whole labeling battle you had over roll.
Right.
So I don't know if you can see this, and I'm going to bring it really close to the camera. Can you see where it says Pinot Gouge?
Yes.
Hold on.
Okay. Also not a permissible variety.
Right.
But there's a loophole in TTB regulations that if you're going to sell it all in state, you can get an exemption from that labeling requirement, and you can call it whatever the hell you want.
Aha.
So that's that. And then if you want to talk about orange wines, we can talk about. So I'm gonna go back to what William was just talking about for a minute. This is, and you can see the color. This is 100% Pinot Noir. It's referred to, a lot of people up here call it a white Pinot, where you have very little skin contact, and that is actually the color of the juice. I call it a Blanc de Noir because actually the inspiration for it came from the base wines we were making for our sparkling program. And we have so many parallels in what we do, William, it's terrifying.
Now, in full disclosure, some of you joined us last week when we had Kathy Joseph from Fiddlehead and Pam Starr from Crocker and Starr, who are actually friends from UC Davis, which is coincidence, but also a nice synergy. You had Santa Barbara and Napa, you had Pinot, and you had Cab. Here I took two winemakers who I know are very different, who I adore spending time with these guys and drinking their wines. They'd never met before this tasting. So it was just fingers crossed they were going to get along.
We may start throwing things yet. You don't know.
Yeah.
And then if you want to push, the boundaries, on rosé, there you go. Okay. So let's talk about Pinots just a little bit. Big difference, I think probably the biggest difference between William and what we do is William is after wonderful wines for the masses. And I am after the very best Pinot I can possibly make. So I think about Pinot Noir as the ballet of the wine world. It is light, it is delicate, it is powerful. If you think about a prima ballerina, there is all this might and force and power in this very delicate and nuanced creature. And that to me is Pinot Noir. Those are great Burgundies, those are great Pinots. And that's what we strive for all the time. The beauty of this vineyard is that because we have these huge elevation changes, because we have 7 different soil types, because we have all of these different aspects, and we grow as many different types of Pinot Noir that we grow, is we can make a wine that tastes like Nuits Saint-Georges. We can take a wine that tastes like Romanée Saint-Vivant. There's a variety of complexity that we have within the vineyard. And Pinot Noir itself is a very mercurial kind of pissy grape to deal with all the time. It has all of these secret relationships that you have to figure out as a winemaker. And so the 3 wines that you've got sent to you, one represents a spot, a place in the vineyard, which is the Heretic, I'll talk about in a second. Another represents one of these secret relationships, which is Jaguar. And then one represents a winemaker's handpicks, which is called the One. The Heretic, which I would advocate, is probably the best one to start with if you wanted to open one and try it. When I walked out back, if I was still online, you saw those really steep north-facing slopes, which when we planted, Josh Bergstrom, David Adelsheim, everybody drove over here, asked me what I was doing, planting a steep north slope. I explained I was putting Pinot Noir in. They all said we were crazy. And lo and behold, it's actually what we have to pick first every year. The Heretic is made strictly from that north, those 2 north-facing blocks that are so steep. And it produces this wine that is very deep, it's textural. It has all of these wonderful wood notes. There's cigar, there's a smoky characteristic to it. It's just this really dense, opulent, and at the same time light and acid-driven Pinot. So that's the Heretic. Jaguar, which is one of our flagship wines, is a secret relationship wine. And this is the fun part about Pinot for me from a blending standpoint. When we harvest the entire vineyard over usually a 4-week period, each of the clones are fermented and kept separately and barreled separately so that we actually have like a candy store to pick from when it comes back to blending. What's funny is William talked about you don't taste color, and I nodded my head yes, because I actually have synesthesia. And when I taste in color. And so if you ever look at my tasting notes, you'll find I might say wintergreen, or I might say blue-black, or I might have all of these different descriptors that are colors to me that is how a wine tastes to me. So when I've got all these barrels that I use from a blending standpoint, a lot of times it's color matching. The Jaguar is a blend of 828, which is one of the really rare Dijon clones that you don't find running around too often, especially up in Oregon. I think Archery Summit and myself are the only 2 people that have it in production. It is blended with Wädenswil, which is one of the Swiss clones. And these 2 clones adore each other. And that result every year is Jaguar. It is this very dark, cherry-driven, hugely powerful, always low alcohols. Our alcohols typically, William, are in the 13 to 13.5 range. I too like acid-driven wines, not big, fat, flabby things. And it's kind of the hallmark signatures that we have. The One is a barrel pick. And what happens is, if we've got 50 or 60 barrels of Pinot Noir put away every year, there are always a handful from 5 or 6 wines, or 5 or 6 barrels, that'll do something kind of magical or mercurial. You don't know what's going to happen to them. And when you taste them again after they've been in barrel, and we stay in barrel almost 2 years, when you get back to them, they're just these magnificent standalone wines. And the trick here is, can you find barrels that will actually blend? Because a lot of times there's this theory in your brain before you do this, and William will know this firsthand, is you might have a barrel that has perfect acidity and another barrel that has magnificent aromatics, and another one that has this incredibly long-lasting finish, and another barrel that has all this beautiful fruit driving. And you think, I've got all the pieces here, and when you put them together, they cancel out. Rather than augment each other, they just cancel. And so the trick with the One is always finding 4 barrels that will blend together harmoniously. We've only made it twice in our history, and it's only in very spectacular vintages. So the 16 that you have is probably the finest one we've made so far. 18 just went to bottle last week. And so we'll see how it matures over the next couple of years before we start drinking any of it. And those are the Pinots that we have.
And there's like this really lovely kind of nuanced difference. I find that the Heretic, the first one, is a little more, got a little more muscle, and there's a velvetyness to the Jaguar. I don't know if you guys are all 3 of them with us, or if you're just at one of them, but if you have any comments,
just do one at a time.
Feel free, again, like make any comments or questions. Oh, they're just beautiful wines. So my palate's really happy right now. If we can tear ourselves off of Pinot Noir, let's hop on over to Mourvedre. The great thing about Mourvedre as a grape is we're not talking about a big style red wine. This is going to follow in vein of that kind of beautiful elegance that you get with Pinot, different grapes, but this one's not going to hit you over the head. Like it's not a big Cabernet or something. So, William.
Thanks, which is not traditional for Mourvedre. This is actually, as of right now, I think I said earlier, our last vintage of Mourvedre. This is a site that another of these places in California, you would never dream that they have vines growing there. So this is the barrios of Antioch.
Seriously?
The Chronicle wrote a great article a couple of years ago. So you go here, these vines they don't know the exact age. They're 120 plus years. They're grown literally in pure sand, which today is now the right-of-ways of PG&E. So 200 feet overhead are humming power lines, and Portuguese immigrants back 100 plus years ago were allowed to just plant because there was nothing in the soils. It's all pure sand. And literally, I should have brought the picture. There's paddle cactus is the cover crop next to these.
I know those vineyards.
Have you seen them?
I've been on those vineyards. And the amazing part about those vineyards is that because they're in pure sand, they were the phylloxera can't survive in that
Right.
soil. And that's why you've got these really old
That's
vines.
why we're lucky enough to have 2 vineyards that are over 100 years old. So if people are not aware, we had to replant almost all of the world's vineyards from a root louse called phylloxera that is an aphid that bites, that goes into and penetrates the roots and causes a small wound, and they slowly die over time. The root louse's soft body can't survive in sand, and so until we get a mutation, which hasn't happened yet, knock on wood, we're able to have these, we call them today self-rooted. Again, this is how we used to always plant vineyards. They're also obviously what we call head trained. So at least in California, putting grapevines into clotheslines, which we did as well. So it's not a knock on it. I mean, we have vertical shoot position, but something that wasn't done. It's a far more, we have 4 head trained vine vineyards. So the French call en gobelet, they're grown in a giant bush format. They're much harder, which is why I haven't planted any yet, but it's on my list. They're much hard, and they're not meant for all varieties. They do very well with Grenache, Mourvedre, Carignan. I think there are probably many varieties would not be suited to head train, but very complex, more complex, uneven ripening, which we love. So you've got berries on the outside in direct sun. Scott would, I'm sure, must love it because it's not north-south. It's a 360-degree radius of sunshine. So you have all aspects of sun. You have inner tart berries that don't get any sun at all, and you have to hunt and peck for every damn berry there is. So we typically have a no-show rate of about 30% for our crew picks for these. So inspiration for this was a female winemaker about 15 years ago in El Dorado, Mari Wells, who doesn't make wine anymore. And it was the first time I had Mourvedre that was kind of light and pretty and delicate. I love places like Bandol, southern France, which is kind of the hallmark for French Mourvedre and other styles. But it can be often a big, brooding, tannic variety. Some of that is winemaking style, and some of that is those other things. But we don't make any kind of big brooding reds. We ferment everything in small 1/2 to 3/4 ton containers. So we don't have a heat buildup. Actually, we have the opposite problem. Usually keeping our ferments at a good temperature with native yeast is something we have to monitor and put out in the sun on occasion where we are. So we're not getting a lot of heat extraction from a big mass. We do some stem inclusion. I think this vintage was 30%, so a little on the lower side. And one of the only vintages that we have, so unlike Pinot Noir and other varieties, we typically only are in barrel for 1 vintage. Just full disclosure, because I don't bullshit. In 2016, we didn't get a bottling date in time before harvest, so we decided to play with something I've been thinking about anyway, and let's carry some wines over and bottle them when harvest was done, and this was one of those. So on the back label, it tells you the élevage was, barrel aging was 15 months. So it had a little more time, a little more concentration, a little more complexity than we usually have. But yeah, anyway, that's it.
So I know that you both have touched a little bit about your philosophies in the vineyard and what you do, but do you think you could elaborate a little bit more? I know specifically because your vineyards are younger, William, that are on your property that you're working with. But can you talk a little bit about what you're looking for, how you're growing, and what your winemaking credos are? Because you might need to explain what carbonic Carignan is, the carbonic side of it, but I also, you know, you don't filter, you don't fine, and I know we've discussed that you were not a fan of whole cluster when you got started and yet have changed that a little bit. So what are some of the things that kind of drive you in making wine?
Oh, I was actually probably more of a fan of whole cluster until I was picking Syrah at almost unripe bricks levels, and then ending up with pHs that were astronomical due to the 5 years of drought. And sorry, these are words that will go over most of your heads, but Scott will appreciate. And Maliks were skyrocketing. So when you pick Syrah, what should be rosé levels, and end up with 4.0 pH, which means you need logarithmic sulfur to keep it stable, I started actually not making blind decisions about stem inclusion. Stem inclusion in wine is so, again, traditionally we didn't used to de-stem wines unless somebody was hand pulling the stems out, that everything was fermented on the stems. The stems add natural soft tannins to the wines. They're common in some Rome varieties. I'm sure Scott has a philosophy on this I would love to hear, because some Pinot Noir makers think it's the devil, some don't. I was actually inspired by a lot of Willamette Pinot producers that were doing stem inclusion. Classic, I think not correct philosophy, at least in California, is if you don't have big brown lignified stems, you can't do stem inclusion, and that's absolutely not true in Burgundy and other places. But basically we're adding a tannin and a spice element. But it does also cause a chemistry shift in the wine, which you don't need to get into, that you just need to be cognizant of. So I only have one wine that we make, the Old Vine Sanso, that we dogmatically go, this is foot tread, all whole cluster every single year. Other than that, it's a decision based on the, this vintage, my 11th, is the most weird weather I've ever seen. And I don't think we've had a normal vintage since I can recall. So we make decisions based on how do the grapes taste and what are their acidity levels and other things to make the best gift that Mother Nature can give us, because the wines will be different. When you're having small producer wines like Scott and ourselves, our wine for the masses, our biggest case lot is 375 cases, and they go down to 25 cases. Those wines will be different every single vintage, and they should be, right? We're not cookbooking Kendall Jackson Chardonnay at Safeway for 500,000 cases a year. So it will be a different, even if it's the same vineyard, the same variety, the same techniques, it will not be the same every year. So what we have is a chance in the vineyard, whether that's dropping fruit or deciding on other things, how much whole cluster we do, to make the very best wine that we can make. Because even though it's insanely cliche, it is very true. Wine is made first and foremost in a vineyard. And I think what Scott and I do is as little as we humanly can to guide those grapes through the process, basically safe and clean. Oops, there's the clean word, and come back out on the back end.
On that note, with your wines, what is your impression of the aging potential of your wines from the Mourvèdre, the Cinsault, or even the Pinot Gris Romano?
Some of these are newer. So Pinot Gris, we only have 3 years, but I save 1 to 3 cases of every 15 SKUs I've made for 11 years. And we taste through them. And we just had an 11 Grenache Blanc 2 nights ago. We were interviewing some interns, and it was stunning. We also had our 15 Grenache Blanc that I threw the last 10 cases away because it was flabby and dead. So typically, with acidity being the backbone, our wines age incredibly well. We don't release them until they're ready. So one of the quirks about us is we will not release a wine until it's ready. So we have wines that people want to buy. They're not ready. We don't release them. And we also release out of order. So you will see us go 13, 15, 16, it makes my distributor crazy, 15, 18, like what the frig are you guys doing? That's so, it just
William,
depends.
I love you. It's a man after my own heart.
Allison called that. So my accountant thinks I'm an idiot, but what Scott and I do are passion projects, right? I mean, we hope someday to make some.
No, William, the real answer is your accountant thinks you're an idiot, but he's an accountant.
Right. So the long story short, the answer is, I mean, most of our wines age very well. There's a few that we design that, like the Carbonic Carignan, we don't intend to be aged. We still have people on Instagram will post, look, we just had your 2012 rosé. I'm like, okay, it was probably good, but that wasn't the intent. Some wines are just meant to drink fun and fresh. But we find, and like I said, we keep all of them. We have like 85, 90 cases of wine in our office that we can't even get past, that of 1 or 2 cases of everything that we go through and open and taste randomly.
And just on a quick note for those, if you don't know what carbonic, maceration is like, it's very typical in Beaujolais Nouveau. It's, I don't know, well, you're probably better at explaining it, but the whole berry, the fermentation starts within the whole berry.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to go to taste it because we're not
No.
tasting it, but it was one of our new wines. It was very popular. So the whole product principle of carbonic is an anaerobic fermentation, which is basically an oxymoron. So you are taking grapes typically intact, although I do know people in Beaujolais that don't do that, they destem them, putting them in a tank or a vessel that can be sealed, using heavy gas. And today, I don't know what they did 100 years ago, blew into it to the bottom to remove all the oxygen and seal it. And so what happens is, because there's no oxygen present, we've removed it all. The berries that are intact, an enzyme that's endemic starts to break down the berries. And so you've got 10,000 little fermentation vessels, not one. And the juice is in the berry. The berries swell and swell and swell. And so the color and the flavor and the aromatics are completely different than a whole cluster fermentation of the same variety that's sitting in an open container in the air. And so it's fresher, fun, brighter, a little more tannic. Anyway.
Thank you for that. So Scott, can you talk a little bit about your wine making philosophy and the 8 rules you think for your wines?
Well, let's talk about vineyard a little bit, because I agree with William, is that, and this goes back to the early 1980s, and I was sitting having a glass of wine. Actually, we were barrel tasting with Frank Altamira. I don't know if you know Frank or not, William. But it was a bad vintage. We were barrel tasting wines together, and his wines were once again gorgeous. And the pundits and all the wine rating critics in the magazines had just been all over the vintage, being horrible. And I asked him, I said, how do you do this year after year after year? These wines are beautiful. And Frank's a man of very few words, and all he did is grunt at me and shake his head towards the outside like that, which I had to clarify. I said, what the hell does that mean? And he says, it's outside. He says, if you can get the fruit ripe, he goes, a monkey can ferment it. And I've taken him to heart, and he's right. So I spend probably 90% of my time in the vineyard. From a farming practice, it's interesting to talk about, because we actually have a trellising system that nobody else uses. Our fruiting wire sits at 42 inches off the ground, because we have sheep that live in our vineyard 365 days a year and do all of our mowing and weed control for us. We also, unlike poor William, who's doing head trained vines and nobody wants to pick, all of our fruit is at chest height. So we're like the #1 pick for anybody wanting to come harvest fruit.
I should point out, because for a visual, if you imagine when you drive through wineries and you always see the trellises and the vines can start very low, his start up higher, and the lowest wire is above where his sheep can reach.
Yeah, our fruiting wire is established based on the reach of our tallest sheep. That's how we engineered the vineyard.
That's brilliant.
And we don't cane prune either. Everyone else up here does cane pruning, and we actually spur prune everything. And so we have these, basically we're developing these really long cordons. And so it's a very different looking vineyard. And it really comes from a lot of experimentation. And that's kind of, I think, philosophically where I come at it from, is that lots of people have told me what you can and can't do in a vineyard and in winemaking. And my normal response is, if it doesn't make perfect sense to me and it isn't crystal clear, I'll try it. And so I was told years ago that spur pruning, which is a different pruning style, where instead of taking out 90% of your canopy and taking 2 shoots from last year and laying them down with this cane pruning, which is what 95% of Pinot Noir is grown on up here, is we cut off all of the shoots from last year and we leave the arm that was there in place. Each node will then put up 2 shoots the following year, of which we will then usually let both grow, and I'll usually keep 1 cluster as opposed to 2 clusters on each shoot. And there's a difference in what happens to the chemistry of the wines. But the only way we discovered that is I actually ran a really long experiment over a number of years, where we spur pruned X number of rows in 5 different blocks, and we harvested that fruit separately. We ran the juice analysis panels separately, and we looked at the outcomes across that against 5 different types of Pinot, and the results were very consistent. And so the next year we took half of the vineyard over that way, ran the same experiments again, same results again, and then eventually took the entire vineyard like that. So for me, philosophically, it's about what works best, what you can empirically see and test and taste, and you come at it from that standpoint. from a winemaking standpoint, simple word for us, it's all about balance. I think that one of the things that you find in a lot of wines that I don't care for is they're going to be over extracted. So they're going to be these big fruit bombs, or they're going to have this really heavy back end tannin. They're going to be lacking acid. They're going to be lacking fruit. They're going to be lacking texture. There's going to be one element that's missing there. So I think all of our winemaking focus is always about harmony and balance. We do a lot of blending in our Pinots, and it gives us the ability to kind of nudge and twist and move those things a bit to kind of get the elegance that we want in all of those wines that we make. We do stem inclusions sometimes. A lot of times it's harvest driven, or it's year driven. Whoops, hang on. Got to get rid of that one. Sorry about that. It's for us, with the decisions we make are really driven by what the harvest was like, as much as anything. I don't know if you've tried it, William, or not, but we have a process that we call layer cake when we do stem inclusion, where we'll destem a bin, we'll throw in a bin of whole cluster, and we'll destem another bin over it, and you get really good immersion, really good suppression of the stems in that kind of style. It doesn't matter to me if they're lignified or not. The thing I worry about on really green stems is a lot of times you'll pick up a lot of mercaptans, especially in Pinot Noir. So you start getting those green pepper aromatics and green pepper flavors in the wine, which I'm not a huge fan of. So that's the biggest thing we guard on. Almost Pinot Noir, almost as a whole, is without stealing the container, because we're so careful on destemming, and it's such a picky little berry that when we go to fermenter, typically when we destem, we're probably 95% whole berry at that point in time too. So really, it's pretty simple. It's all about balance for us. And I'm with William. You know, I'm not a natural winemaker. I'm not an organic winemaker. I'm not a biodynamic winemaker. If we're anything, the whole vineyard is run on the concept of improvability. Is I want next year to be better than this year that was better than last year. As you know, because we've talked about sustainable before, I think sustainable is a super low bar, because all that means is you're maintaining what you had last year, and I don't think that's much of a target to shoot for. So we're always about improvability. And it's just, as the vineyard matures and as you learn the vineyard, you get better and better at your crafts, is really what it comes down to.
And just really quickly, the ageability of your wines?
All of the Pinots will run 20 years without even blinking. We have, and William hit it. And I've argued this for years, because a lot of people always talk about having tannins and structure to carry the wine, and it's always about acid as far as I'm concerned. It's a chemical function. It's about pH. It's about what you go to bottle with, and our wines have always got this beautiful long acid, good low pH. They run forever. Our first vintage off the estate was 2009, which we opened one of those about 3 weeks ago just to see how it was doing, and it tasted like it was 3 years old. I mean, these are going to run a long, long, long time. Even the whites that we make, we've had them 5-7 years out, and they're great. But again, it's that same kind of fundamental structure of letting acid be one of the drivers of your wine.
So if you didn't open all your wines today, know that you've got plenty of time and can see what happens, or pour in along the way and watch. Does anyone have a question or comment? You're welcome to jump off of mute and ask it out loud.
Please.
Anyone? Ed, I think I saw you throw your hand up. Did you have a question?
Ed's not moving on my screen.
Ed's not moving on mine either.
Either Ed can hold really, really still, or something. Oh, Ed's back.
No, it was more of a clap for your detailed explanation of your methods and your vision of winemaking. We're really, it was a clap thing.
Okay.
Excellent. For both of you.
Any other questions or comments? It's kind of a treat for me. I was a little nervous, as I said, putting these two together, because they're both the most incredibly passionate, wonderful people with very strong opinions, rightfully so. And I think that their opinions are reflected in how phenomenal their wines are. And I'm very happy to see that they're far more like-minded as I expected.
No, I mean, a bunch of the things that Williams touched on, I'm sitting here and just nodding my head going, yeah, that works, that works, that works, that works. It's just, you know.
It's a good case for the lack of not embracing dogma in winemaking. I mean, Scott's making Pinot Noir, tiny berries in a different place. I'm working with red Rhone varieties that Mourvedre and Sanso look like table grapes. I mean, so when winemakers have this dogmatic approach that they're 100% right because it's what you always do, I'm like, it's just complete bullshit.
So you have to understand also, neither of them really spend a lot of time talking about their backgrounds. Scott, more global marketing, working around the world, a marketer. And William is a tech guy, so very break down and very, the way they approach wine is not from a trained winemaker.
I'm losing audio on Allison.
Sorry, airplane in the background.
I say had an airplane, yeah, it's gone now.
Okay.
But it's really nice that these are both self-trained winemakers. You know, they've experimented, they've tried, they listen, they learn, and I'm a big fan of both of these wines. I think as the wine committee chair of Vintage Hollywood, I get to pick a lot of my wine friends to invite, and I was really excited to have these two come for the first time this year, and I'm really sorry that they couldn't join us, but I hope you understand now why I was so excited and pushed you all to buy these wines. So.
Well, and I'm gonna correct Allison on one thing that she said about me, is that I wasn't a global marketer. Actually, my job around the world was fixing broken businesses.
Oh, that's right.
What happens to you is that you're sent into a situation where you have to fix something that has never been fixed before. It stayed broken and people have tried. And so you develop this very cynical, very critical eye looking at everything that you do, and you think about it very clearly in terms of, does this work, does it? So the first thing you have to do is immediately toss any dogma or any of this. Is every industry I ever walked into, it was always like, why do you do it this way? That's how we've always done it. Why have you always done it that way? Because that's how you have to do it. Why do you have to do it that way? Because that's how we've always done it. You know, and you get this circuitous, this circular argument running that drives you insane. And so when I approached putting the vineyard in, it was a very critical analysis. So when I went looking for a piece of property at the top of a mountain on the north side of the hill with the soil types that we wanted in an area that has basically double the rainfall as rest of Portland, there was nobody in their right mind looking for vineyards up here at that point in time. We're now surrounded in the last 3 years by people from the Bahamas, from Napa, from France. Jean-Nicolas Millot is my new next door neighbor, William.
Oh, great.
And Wall Street. I mean, it's just the amount of money that's poured in around us is based on the wines that we're producing off of this site. And they're all playing copycat.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, what I heard Scott say that resonated as well is that he's a huge buyer and consumer of wine. I still, on the farm, we turned part of the garage into a wine cellar. I mean, I have 2,000 plus bottles, more than I can even get to fast enough. And I still,
what wine did you make?
And 2,000 bottles,
So do I.
not cases.
Oh, okay.
And I still buy wine at a pace that which I can't consume. I've scaled it back, but it's just
Do you have children, William?
I have a grown son, and then I have all the animals out there.
Well, does your son like wine?
He does, not as much as he should, but yeah.
Well, all three of my kids love wine, and it's, you know, they see me adding to the cellar constantly. I'm ahead of you. I've bought 3,000 bottles right now. And they know I'm never going to get through it. So every time something comes in, they just look at me and go, thanks, Dad.
That's great, yeah. I'm out of space and on threat of leaving me if I buy any more wine, so we're curtailing that back. But
the donkeys are moving out.
Yeah. Actually, parents should be back from the winery soon. We were open today. One thing I just want to add, because in case everybody did open up all of our wines, please don't feel compelled you have to chug them tonight. If you didn't corv on them, I have a corv on every Vinusa half the time. Throw the cork back in the bottle. Throw it in the fridge overnight. That 38 degrees. We do this. I'm Scott's saying we have wine ADHD. I get in a mood where I can't find what I want, and I will open like 10 bottles in a night. And then finally, eventually, Karen says, "That's enough. There's no way." And so, but if you just throw the cork in the bottle, throw it in the fridge, and then pull it out a half an hour before you want to drink it, that wine will go, if it's half full or more, it'll go 5+ days in the fridge. So please don't feel compelled. You have to binge drink the 3 to 6 wines that you've opened right now, no matter how great and low alcohol they are from both of us.
Or if you're suffering from the pandemic badly, go ahead and binge drink them.
I clearly can't drink all the wines I have, because that's just a smattering of what I'm I've got double the amount in front of my face right now. So, but you know, what's also really special about these wines, these are wines that you might find them in a couple of restaurants when you go back to restaurants, if we ever go back to restaurants. But they're really wines that are direct to consumer with very few placements. They're not going to be in the mainstream, and they're wonderful wines that are in some ways more word of mouth. You know, you taste them and you try, and whether you join their wine club or you visit them when you're up in their areas, and spread the word. These are those kind of wineries. So, William, are you in any retail markets?
We actually, part of our growth was, and it's boomeranged right back full into our direct to consumer thing. So we picked actually the markets we were largest as direct to consumer: New York, big concentration in LA and San Francisco, and we just added Seattle and Portland. So we picked markets where we were selling mostly direct as a way to kind of augment that. In particular, because too, we you know, the 3-4 month summer shipping moratorium. So we do you won't find us in a lot of places. And I have a soft spot for retail personally, which turned out to be lucky or brilliant in the pandemic, given the restaurant scene. But I flogged my distributors to please go sell to little bitty wine shops and educate people on things, and do as many little support, can't now, but used to do as many in-store tastings as we could for consumers to talk to them and educate them. I love being in front of people. That's why we do the events that we do. It's just really great opportunity. I find the current generation of wine drinkers probably the most exciting that I've seen in my time here. Very exploratory, very creative. And so it's a really great time to, I think, reshape the market at a time when it's going on. So we're very visible and vocal about the principles that we believe in and espousing those.
And Scott, I know you're in a few restaurants, more local.
The only markets you'll find us in restaurants are Dallas and Houston, Texas. Our demographics in terms of where our wine moves and how it moves are kind of funny. So 98% of what we produce goes straight to consumer. 2% ends up in restaurants right now. And the other one that's really fun is that 95% of what we produce in Oregon leaves the state. So 5% of our wine is consumed by Oregonians. 95% is not. We have never been open. So, you know, everyone's tasting by appointment right now across Oregon. I'm not sure what California is shut back down again, hasn't it? But Oregon is still tasting by appointment only.
Tasting rooms are still open, but indoor is closed.
Yeah, we're tasting outside. So we're open one day a week for the public. The others by appointment.
Yeah, we've never been open. We've been appointment since we started.
Yeah.
And about 97% of our new business is referral all the time. It's just people coming. It's like we end up with great customers and loyal customers. Our wine club, we have basically zero turnover. And so it's a wonderful little business to have. It's been fairly pandemic proof. Where we're going to get hurt is just the normal 4 or 5 tastings, private tastings that I would do during the days in the summer. It's going to be, we're being super picky about who gets to come up. And so it's really 4 or 5 a week right now. So that's the biggest difference for us.
Melanie just asked a question, which I think Scott in part answered on chat, how we were doing. It was pretty scary going into it, but we have had an amazing year, sales above normal and direct, and the distribution that we did, despite we launched Seattle 2 weeks before they were the first city to really do nuclear meltdown, and still were able to get into, they immediately pivoted and focused on little small community markets, and we were able to get stuff into there. And so we have, knock on wood, unlike a lot of producers, we've just invested another $15,000 in equipment to expand some of our other programs. We're not cutting back harvest. We're not screwing any of our growers that we have contracts with. A little scary as the second wave starts to get worse, but we've been really similar to Scott. Our wine club churn rate is almost zero. It's a unicorn, which Karen attests to from doing wine consumer research. So yeah. We've been really blessed with passionate people. I mean, people like Melanie that I've known for years, and you and others who have supported our brand and have helped us stay afloat. March came, I thought, oh shit, we're done. Like, we canceled all bottling for the next 3 months and said, yeah, and the industry has been amazing, and we're very lucky and fortunate and blessed, frankly.
I want to thank you guys all for supporting these wineries. And as you know, with Vintage Hollywood, we really look at boutique wineries, small producers. It's an opportunity for you to taste wines you may not have had in the past. Wineries that you might be able to seek out on your next journey up into a wine country. But it's supporting these wineries that keeps them going, because they're not the massive brands doing advertising, they're really word of mouth. And as you can attest by tasting the wines, they know what they're doing. So if there aren't any other questions, I hope you all had fun. I hope you enjoyed the wines. The wines you didn't open, I hope you will enjoy them all the more the next time, because you now have a story with these wines. You now know the faces of the people that made them. You saw a little view of the vineyard, and it gives you a little more context. And I think that always helps connect people to wine. So William and Scott, thank you so, so much for joining us today. And if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free. But thank you all for taking some time on your Saturday. Stay safe, stay healthy, wear your masks, and drink lots and lots and lots of good wine.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you for setting up.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Really very impressive.